John has asked me to talk about two spells and one exorcism I've done. These are done a fairly long time ago. I'm not actively into Wicca anymore. But to talk about Wicca and magic to do it justice would take many hours of videotape. And so this is going to be a very brief discussion of power. Now, what we need is power, and we need it every day in our lives, and we also especially need it when we're doing a spell. We can get power from the elements. We can get power from the earth. We can get power from the sky. We derive it from running water or from lakes or from the ocean. We derive it from fire. We get it from the night sky and the stars. We get it from the sun and the moon and the planets. Now, the planets are a long way away, and it's difficult to believe that there can be any kind of possible communication between ourselves and the planets, but according to the ancient idea, the planets are planetary beings, they're gods, and they have powers. And if we can persuade them to help us, then we should. And there are structures in Wiccan magic, just as there are in ceremonial magic, which is comes from the classical era and requires much more in the way of expensive preparations than Wicca does. Wicca was recreated in the 50s through the researches of anthropologists who discovered that. In fact, the practices of people in South America and Africa and tribal Australia are fairly similar. And so that led to the conclusion that the witchcraft of ancient Europe was similar to that, and that's how it got launched. What we have four elements to represent the four directions. These are air, earth, fire, and water. And we have a tool for each element. In the east, we have air, and we use the athame. So that you can see this has some inscribed sigils and things like that on it. Athame comes from the Greek word theme, which means to govern. And it's made out of steel because steel is mostly iron. The only source of iron for people in the ancient world came from meteorites, and meteorites were de facto sacred. In the south, we have fire. In the west, we have water. And in the north, we have earth. Wiccans face north because that's the direction of power rather than east. That's the direction for illumination and for Christianity. So when I wanted to do the spell to find a lover, I had to get prepared. I had to do what's called magical sweeping. I had to get all the candles ready. They had to all be the appropriate color and the appropriate number. And since 7 is the ruling number for Venus, everything had to mount up to 7. I had to get rose water because that's sacred to Venus. I had to use rose oil because that's sacred to Venus, rose petals, etc. It's all got to be part of a unit. And I had to wait for the full moon. And so while waiting for the full moon, I went to a stripper's club. And when the stripper came off stage, I went back and asked her if I could buy her panties for $60, and she sold me them with alacrity. And right there in the club, I picked up the panties and smelled them. And looking back on it, that must have been pretty funny looking, but I didn't care. When I got home and started doing the ritual, I had to cast a circle and get the candles going and sprinkle all those various things that I was talking about. And there are two essential chants that Wiccans use for a great number of spells. One is called the Witch's Rune, and one is called the Cone of Power. The Witch's Rune goes like this: darksome night and shining moon, east, then south, then west, Then north, hearken to the witch's rune. Here I come to call you forth. Earth and air, water, fire, wand, pentacle, sword. Listen now to my desire. Hearken now unto my word. Cords and censer, scourge and knife, powers of the witch's blade. Awaken all now into life. Come now as the charm is made. That's part of it. And then the other one is much shorter, but you run while you're doing it, and that's what builds up the power. It goes, it's called a cone of power. Circle around the fire and raise a cone of power to bring what I desire. Oh, so mote it be. Weave magic in the moonlight dance and sing the witch's song. Weave magic in the moonlight dance and sing the witch's song. And you spiral while you're doing this. And when it comes to a climax, when you can't run any faster, that's when you use your athame to charge the spell. And then I used the panties to masturbate into, and when I had my orgasm, I imagined it going out into the universe to attract the woman kind of woman I wanted. I had to write down a few things. One, I used parchment because parchment comes from cows, and cows are sacred to Venus. I made a monogram out of my name, which you can see here is, yeah, very simple. You just eliminate double letters and play with the loops, and that's the monogram I use. I put that on one side of a piece of parchment paper, and this is the statement that I had. I bring me an intelligent, pretty, busty, lusty artist, and that all got condensed into bring me it lipsia. And so that's what I had to pronounce when I was let go of that during masturbation. Now I couldn't use a person that I knew or the image of a person that I knew because that's considered unethical. And the reason it's considered unethical is because it messes with other people's will. And it might work for a while, but also it might not, and it could become a painful mess. The idea is not to make a love slave. The idea is to have a real person come to you willingly. And it worked. 2 weeks later, I went to AA, and the woman I wanted to meet was there. We went outside to have coffee and chat afterwards. She was brilliant and an artist at making quilts. Her work belonged in the Lowell Quilting Museum. And she told me in the first time we met that she wanted to get divorced from her husband and that she was looking for a new partner. If that's not a spell working, I don't know what a spell is. So we had very passionate time for the first year. We made love twice a day for 6 weeks. We really enjoyed each other's company. We loved being together. We went to AA a lot, maybe a little too much. But what I forgot to ask for when I launched the spell was I wanted somebody sane. Instead, I got somebody who had a pretty good panic disorder and had paranoia on top of that. And if she was paranoid about the one world government or wasps building nests and listening to her while she's talking and stuff like that, I would have just accepted it. It's like, oh well, some people are paranoid. But no, the paranoia was about me. That I was going to take her house and steal everything she had and all this kind of stuff. And I could calm her down, but it didn't go away. And it was very painful to be going through this. And so finally the relationship ended very painfully. Um, as for the exorcism, this happened in Minneapolis, and I lived in a old Victorian house with 3 stories and an attic, and the attic was very large. It was sectioned off by curtains so that 3 different people could live up there, because it was much cheaper to live up in the attic than it was to live downstairs. And in fact, there was no heat in the attic, and I just knew I was going to have to deal with that when winter came, and buy more quilts or an electric blanket or something. But this happened in late September or so. One of the women who lived up there was named Joy. She was a medium, and she brought over to the house a man who did rebirthing trauma. This was an idea that was popular at the time, that birthing was a traumatic event, and that if you want to live a happy and successful life, you got to get rid of the trauma. I thought this was a crock of shit, but I was experimental, and I said, okay, what the hell, it's free. And so we were lying down on the floor, foot to foot, with a walkway in between us, and he started to use breathing techniques to help us to relax. I did get relaxed, but I didn't get hypnotized, which was kind of essential to the experience. Nobody's ever been able to hypnotize me. So I was lying in that state, and Joyce screamed out, "There's a demon in here!" So I grabbed my trusty athame, and starting in the south, I called upon the god names and worked around the circle. And then when I got to the guy who was mumbling about raping women, and who had been identified as the guy the demon was trying to possess, I summoned up all the courage I had. You have to have a ferocious courage to face and beat a demon. I have it. And I straddled him and sat on his chest and took the athame and dug it right into his sternum and pushed really hard and chanted names from the Kabbalah, really a divine name like Shaddai El-Kai, which means the Almighty and ever-living God. And demon left, and in the morning, all the women asked me to evict the guy, which I did. I kind of felt like a hero, but at the same time, I knew that things come back, and I have been evicted twice without notice in the middle of winter. So it has quasi-success on it, I think. And unless John has more questions for me, that's the end of those 2 topics.